Live. So excited to be here today. We have a really fun conversation planned for you. You might be wondering, why is there no one named Will here? Of all three of them, none of them could be here. So you've got me. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Chelsea Castle here in the marketing team at Lavender. And today we have a fun topic. We'll be talking about creative outreach, being authentic and unforgettable. And we've got a great host or a great co-host today. A couple quick housekeeping notes. Yes, today's talk will be recorded. You can catch it after on YouTube or on our podcast, Lavender Later. And joining us for this very fun topic is the one and only, the sales rebel himself, Dale Dupree.
Yo, what's up? What's going on? I see that Will couldn't be here, but he's watching, by the way. So
He's
what's
watching.
up with that, Will? I mean, it's way better to be here with Chelsea, just so everybody knows. But I mean, Will, come on, bro. You can't at least pop in and say hi to me, in person. It's kind of messed up.
Yeah. Yeah, you get me instead. He'll have to hop in later. He's an SF.
I get it.
Enjoying
He's
conference.
so popular. He has his own thing going now. He's Will Aiken. Everybody knows who he is.
He sure does. And everyone knows who you are. Super excited to chat today. The rebel himself. We like to just kind of not bury the lead, Dale, and just jump right in. So to go ahead and get started, what is one thing that you want everyone to hear relating to prospecting? If they hear one thing, what should that one thing be?
Great question. I think today, specifically, since we're talking about creativity, I'd just like everybody to recognize that prospecting is really difficult right now. At least that's what I keep reading on LinkedIn. Unless you're a rebel, and like I'm going to take a stand on that right here, right now, that the people that are out there that are looking at the mediocrity of what's happening in the sales world, the way that the status quo is defining the buying process, the way that things are evolving, those of us that are looking at it and saying, I will not become a victim to it, and I will not, fall in the midst of everything that's happening and collapse all the things that I've built so far, but instead are saying, well, what do people actually need at this time, right? And reverse engineering the process even to an extent, and saying, at the end of the day, no matter what's happening in the world, that people connect with people. And that is always done through trust and credibility, which is the foundation of creativity. If I can creatively approach people, if I can creatively bring my message to the forefront, then it washes out all the noise, all of the garbage, and it stands on its own. And it stands very tall as well, too. And I'm not saying that it annihilates a down economy or creates the perfect outcomes by any means. But if you can get 10% better in regards to your results by using creative approaches, then why the hell aren't you?
I love that. Such a good point. And the point about authenticity is really key, right? I really wanted to kind of double click on that. I think you've said this one thing about how what was it? Remembering to be human is not only about the person you're reaching out to, but it's also about you, right? So are you enjoying your time working and the ripple effect that has? So can you go a little bit more into that and why being creative in sales is important?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think there's a kind of a disconnect with people when they get to an office and start a job, whether it's as an AE, SDR, customer management, satisfaction. It doesn't matter what role you're in sales. Ultimately, when you get to an office, you typically close yourself off and become that role and the person in that role, instead of saying, well, no, I'm going to be Dale Dupree at this company, being happy, enjoying my life, doing what I do, which will attract other people to you. Right? I feel like we've systematized and created convolution with process when it comes to work and the way that we view it. And I think this is the disconnect in creativity as well, too. Is, we have terms like brand guidelines or marketing guidelines. And instead of those things being like the color, hey, just make sure it's purple, right? Instead, what we do is we choke the life out of the human and ask them to please step into this box, and robotically go through the motions to help us build our corporation. So for me, it's about people standing up for themselves inside of their place of work and saying, no, I won't be silenced or belittled inside of my role. Like I believe that I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I will live like that on a daily basis. So I am a big advocate for happiness. Obviously, I'm someone that struggled with depression my whole life. Thank God for the last couple of years, I've been that the burden has been lifted to a capacity, and my new lifestyle has really healed a lot of those things. But so is my company and my community, just the same. I have to give credit to those folks as well too. My best friend and co-founder Jeff Villegas, my incredible employees and colleagues Jeremiah Griffin, Shay Holcomb, Beth Pagano, Rafe Barreto. I mean, like, I owe so much to the community that we built ultimately, and the community wouldn't have been attracted to anything that we're doing if I wasn't Dale. If I was something different, we wouldn't be here today having this conversation even. And I believe that people can do this without starting a business. And that's the problem, is that so many people out there think, well, I can't because I got a boss. Like, rebel. I had a boss for a very long time. For 13 years of my career, even as a VP of sales, I still had a boss. I still had CEO. I still had founders, right? So, I know exactly what you're going through, but nothing stopped me from being who I am, being happy, and then bringing that creativity alongside me. Because look, there's so many people listening right now that will say things like, I don't know how to be creative. Or let's even look at it like this. I am creative, but I don't think I can be creative in this space I'm in, right? I sold a copy machine for the love of all things holy. I sold a copy machine, and I was the most out of this world, ridiculous sales rep that there is, from that industry. I'll challenge anybody to try and take me out on that for sure. Like, I'd love to see somebody take my crown in that industry, but there's just nobody out there. Right. I was a guy going around passing out swords to stab their copiers with. Right. I had giant 6-foot cardboard cutouts of myself, like finding golden copiers in the middle of the woods. Right. Like, I did the wildest stuff to get people's attention, but also preached inside of that familiarity and relevance and emotional context around things that I could help people with ultimately, instead of it just being all about Dale. Because community building is sales. And when we make other people feel something, and the process of what it is that we're trying to accomplish with them, which is to sell them something ultimately, which is translated back to serving them with something. Okay. That's the bottom line. If the person doesn't feel like you are helping, then you are just a transaction in that case, and you'll most likely be beat by Amazon when they price check you. Right. So if we can understand that perspective, and we can understand the box exists, get outside of it, take ownership of your life, of your job, of your position at the organization, be a rebel. When somebody says you have to do it this way, I'm not saying like disobey your boss, right? But what I am saying is like search deep within and find that principled place to say, yeah, okay, so what you're telling me to do though does not create wonder. It does not give an experience. It does not set me apart from my competition. So it does not help me. And because of that, I can't help other people. So that would be my very long-winded answer to your very easy, short question.
Oh man, I think you just said everything you need to say. I think we're done here, folks. Like, that was all the gold. Like, have a good one. I'm just kidding. So many good sound bites there. A lot I want to unpack. You said something about your personal experience, and I know you share that a lot. So I want to just thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. I think it really helps your message, and it helps other people continue to kind of engage and participate in your message too, of just being vulnerable and authentic. Someone in the chat asked, what does authenticity even mean? Which I think is a really good question. We hear that word tossed around a lot. Maybe some people misuse it as a buzzword. To me, authenticity and vulnerability are connected, right? It's allowing yourself to be seen and just being yourself. I think a lot of times, especially in tech and sales and marketing, we forget that we bring our whole selves to work as humans, right? And one of the beautiful things I think that's happened over the last few years, from the pandemic and remote work, and just as humans, we're wired for connection. So no matter what you're doing in your role, whether it's sales, marketing, something else, you're still a human, right? And you need to bring that to the table. And one of the things that you preach, Lavender preaches, we help you remember that there's a human on the other end. Even if you're trying to sell them, you're also trying to help them, right? So I think it's too, like, Dale, how do you help people understand how to be themselves without like maybe crossing a line or being too vulnerable, or like what's like the right balance to strike in being yourself in sales?
Personally, I don't believe that there really is a line. This is kind of unpopular, especially in the sales circles. And that, sure, like I'm not going to sit down with somebody and just expose my abuse and my depression and like on a level that can harm them, right? Because ultimately, that's all that does. It's not even about what's appropriate or what's crossing the line. It's about how are we stewarding this relationship that we're trying to build with this person. Like when I met my wife for the first time, I knew 100,000% that I would marry this woman. If I would have said to her, "Hey, I'm gonna marry you," like right now, and look, I know there are stories out
She would
there
have
like it.
ran.
She probably would. I don't know. I think she liked me
Probably
too.
not.
I like to
Yeah,
think at
I'm just
least
kidding.
she did, but but you get my drift, right? If I were to sit with her and just be like, "Hey, here's all my baggage," right? Are you sure you want to marry me? Like it's kind of what happens in that moment, right? And instead of like again stewarding the relationship effectively, appropriately, and in a way that exudes excellence. Sales is life. Life is sales. So when we talk about it being a role, it always like makes me gag a little bit because in my mind I think, were you never 16 years old trying to convince your parents to let you stay up an extra hour? Have you never been in the situation like where you're with your friends and like maybe you don't have enough money to buy like cigarettes or a hamburger and you're bartering with them, hey, I'll let you drive my car that has a little gas in it if you'll buy some lunch for. I mean, like it's life, right? It 100%. So the more that we can understand that our authenticity is literally who we are as a genuine person, right? And my dad said it to me the best a long time ago. My dad was like, "It's not so much about authenticity as much as the word, as much as it's about understanding your own journey. So the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, the perils, right? The the things that you might be ashamed of, even to share with. Like two things. My dad always told me, he said, Dale, you are loved and forgiven for those things. Always remember that. And the second piece of that was that my dad would say, there is power in your vulnerability, not just to be able to share those things that make you who you are, but ultimately to be able to have a healthy amount of arrogance, if you will, in who you are as a human on the good as well too. That to me, that is confidence, right? People love when confidence is exuded because it's hard. It's even for a guy like me, it's not easy to just constantly be confident in everything that I do, right? But because I'm so authentic, it's easier for me to get to that place. So if I'm speaking with somebody for the first time and I don't like something they said to me, I'm not going to tell them like screw off and I don't like what you just said to me, but I am going to say, why did you say that? Can you tell me more about why you said that? When someone in 2009, this is one of my favorite stories of rejection. When someone told me I'm not interested, I remember everybody had all these like moves, and this is 2009, right? So the moves were like just atrocious for the most part. Like not to say that they're not atrocious these days as well too, but I remember exactly what I did is the person said they were not interested. They turned around and they walked away. And I said, hey, can I plead with you real quickly? And I think she thought I was about to like ask for, something, extra. And I said, I'm trying to build a better life for myself. And it's very difficult when people give me short ass answers like that I can't do anything with. And so I said, from one person to another that's trying to build a better life for himself, and I said, because clearly you have a very good one. I was at a big medical practice. She was the head of hundreds of people at this organization. Would you please just share with me what I could do better? And I remember she took me back and we hung out and had a great conversation, and she never bought anything, and that's okay. She helped me in that moment. And because I'm willing to be authentically Dale in all things, and I'm willing to risk, I'm willing to be bold, I'm willing to take a chance, right? No matter what the circumstance, because I believe there's more to life for me. And that if I just live over here in the Skittles and the rainbows, right? It's never, and the unicorn farts or whatever they say, I'm never going to actually get where I want to go.
Yeah.
So ultimately authenticity is about risk at the end of the day, because it's tough for me to tell people I've tried to kill myself and failed at it for myriads of reasons. But I have been freed from that truth about my life. I have been freed from the shackle of what that has held me to for so long. And I understand how powerful it is to give other people freedom in that. And so when I apply that to sales, I think if I'm Lavender as an example, and this isn't me like trying to recruit myself to your sales team or anything. I own a business. Okay. Wills, all you Wills out there watching me. If I'm with Lavender, I'm in my mind, like what's going to drive me is ultimately this identity of making people better. Because that, to me, that's what Lavender does. It's not that it makes my email better or it helps me to strategically narrate the story I'm trying to tell. What it does is it humanizes me, and that I get to say to myself, wow, the way I originally wrote this email is pretty bad. And it is disconnected. It isn't focused on the right things. And that's self-development. That's what sales is all about. Right. So another long-winded answer. Hopefully that one hits the points though.
No, it certainly does, and I think you kind of answer a lot of questions I already had written down in one diatribe. It's just so good, and everything you were just talking about too really hits the nail on the head too about being memorable. I know you previously have shared a story from when you were selling copiers, and the office manager who kind of sold through, even after you were no longer selling copiers, still reached out to you because she remembered you and she still wanted to work with you and she needed to to make other purchases. And I think being memorable too is like, it's just can seem so hard, but to everything that we're talking about today, maybe it's just we get in our own head about it being hard. I kind of want to bring all of that back to email, right? And especially connecting it to something you said earlier about creativity. I know a lot of folks think, oh, I'm not creative. It's just like not a muscle I have. I'm left brained. I'm not right brained. I actually don't think I think we're all creative. I think certain things happen to us in life someone tells us we're not creative or that art sucks. So then we think we're not creative, but it's a muscle, right? Like we can all kind of exercise it. So can you give us some tips on how we can apply some of these strategies and pattern interrupts in email, especially for folks who maybe think that they aren't creative or struggle with that?
For sure. I think the best way to start this answer is to sit in a place that most people don't go because it's too simple. Creativity starts with truth. So if a great example of this truth, like to apply it easily in the way I explain it for myself, I love to just go to like copier days when I'm explaining a point specifically because I sold them for 13 years. It's really easy for me to speak that language no matter what I do with my life. And so if I go back and I think about, well, what did I do to be creative on a basic level? A very basic level, because the place we have to start with creativity is not to confuse. Okay. It's a huge difference. And ultimately also not to convolute. So maybe I'm not necessarily confusing somebody, but I'm creating so much stuff in this moment that it's hard for the person to pinpoint like what they're actually feeling and whether or not they want to respond, reach back out, get in touch with me as much as they just are like, well, that was a pretty wild, crazy ride that I just went on. And now I need to go see a therapist and maybe I'll call this guy back. Right? Like we don't want to create those moments for people. We want to be very basic and simple in the way that we are creating. So a couple different versions of that. One, I'll shamelessly plug the crumpled letter because I created it in the midst of defining my outreach back in my earlier years in 09 and 2010. And what I did is I said, okay, so every copier person walks in and does the same thing. And look, all of you can take note of all these things. It's a free training session right here. So think about how is your competitor coming into the front door, whether that's over the phone, through an email, in person, right? You have to take the concept of prospecting and think, how is someone else doing it to start? It's the number one way to start a creative track for yourself. So in my case, it was going in the front door for the most part. So if I'm walking in the front door, what does every other copier guy look like, smell like, feel like, the whole 9 yards, right? I really analyzed essentially my competition and what simplicity looked like to understand how I can stand out from the noise. And so what I came to the conclusion of is, for the most part, what people suffered from was a salesperson coming in, asking to speak with someone in charge of X, leaving a business card, some kind of brochure or white paper, being a little demanding, and most of the stuff that was given got thrown away. And this was literally what people would tell me too. Some would say, we put it in the Rolodex. That means they threw it away. And that, especially in 2009 or 2010, when those things actually existed. If anybody actually has a Rolodex out there, throw that in the comment, because that would be very interesting data. Will Aiken has one for sure. He definitely has one. So here's the creative side coming to play. Here's all the simple things that people do and how it works. So I have to take those things and say, how do I create a very familiar experience that connects with somebody? Because none of the other stuff connects. So person walks in the front door, they sniff you out, right? Theoretically, right? Salesperson, this is definitely not a patient, right? That's like how they look at you when you come in. So I have to give them an experience and make them feel something different. So my talk track is different, right? Instead of saying, hey, can I speak to so-and-so? I say, hey, I have a letter for this person. How do I get this to them? Right now, so already I've just in this small way that I've introduced myself, I have created a moment for this person to say, well, this isn't typical, first and foremost. And secondly, they become curious. What kind of letter? Like, what is this letter? Oh, it's a crumpled letter. What is that? No one knows what that is, right? So now I have created a little bit of mystery, but I have a visual, right? The number one thing I want y'all to remember here is that if you're explaining things, like if you're writing emails and try to be creative in your emails, you have to have somebody thinking and visualizing the creativity. Okay. So if it's hard for them to do that, like if you make a Game of Thrones comment as an example, and the person you're writing doesn't even have like the internet outside of their work email, then they're never going to know what the hell you're talking about and how creative that was. So it's about relevance just as much as it is about familiarity. What is this person going to be familiar with, right? So this crumpled letter, when the decision maker gets it instead of a business card, because the curiosity is just flowing through this place now, right? Everybody wants to know, who the hell is this guy? What is this weird letter? Well, when they open it and it feels like trash, right? And earlier I said the brochure goes in the trash, the business card goes in the trash, right? So it feels like trash. So it's familiar to them when they read it and they say, hey, 90% of the sales and marketing you get gets thrown away anyway. So I just pre-crumpled this to make it easier for you to ball up and toss. When they read that, they go, man, this guy gets it. He gets the problems that I go through with salespeople that come in here. And so I'm going to give him a little bit more of a chance than everybody else. Even if it's just a tiny bit, that's all we're trying to get. We're not trying to slam dunk a sale in this moment. We're just trying to break down a wall that has been built by the sins of the father in sales. Every single one of us comes from generations of people that have done nothing but manipulate and torment their prospects to try and sell something. And so if we go in and go, yeah, we get it. Salespeople suck. Everyone hates them. And we recognize that truth right away and understand that we're here to change that. That is confidence, right? To hand something to somebody that they're going to throw away anyway is confidence. It's a healthy amount of arrogance, right? Then all of a sudden, I drop 20 of those off and I set 17 appointments. And boom, everything changes. And from there, it becomes different iterations, empty donut boxes, empty pizza boxes, for ghosting. Like there's a whole process here. And really what every seller needs to hear me say right now is not that the only way to be creative is to have some kind of experiential drop. Although I highly recommend using them as a first touch and then utilizing your email to create a familiar moment. That crumpled letter in the mail, right? As a subject line, make somebody go, what? Or make somebody go, oh, I got that.
I remember that. Yeah. So you recommend starting with something physical and then going to like a first touch email. Is that kind of similar to what you talk? I know you talk about FTP a lot, first touch piece.
Yes. Look at you. Yes. FTPs. We love that concept because first impressions are very important. You don't get a second. So to define a first impression as a salesperson creatively, introducing somebody to yourself by speaking to familiar things that they have to deal with or go through is powerful. Because then if I send that email, it's less of I've got 87 emails in my inbox right now just from last night that I've got to go through. And I'm not going to open all of them. I'm sorry, anybody out there watching that might have emailed me. I'm not, unless I see that Chelsea put FTP in her subject line. I'm gonna be like, what? You know our acronyms over here? What's going on?
I'm a
And
marketer, of
anybody
course.
listen, anybody listening right now that heard me say just that, if you email me the subject line FTP, I'll delete your email right away. Okay. So add
Sorry,
something
guys.
else to it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's
yeah,
so good. Yeah.
that's my perspective.
Yeah, that's really important. I think what about people who are like, well, I'm emailing a CFO or a CEO and they feel like they need to be a little more professional or they think that something funny or creative may not land. What would you say in those scenarios?
I love this question. I have sold to publicly traded companies, software and copier bundles, right? So millions of dollars worth of enterprise software and equipment. This question usually when it comes, I don't think people always realize my past. Not to say that you didn't, Chelsea, but I think most people when they ask it, they think, well, what kind of feedback have you gotten? No, I've experienced it, right? Like I have left a note on the Bentley of a CFO's car in the parking lot, right?
So
I've
cool.
done very creative stuff with people that most likely, you would think, or the world, I should say, would flop, right? But look, these people are, I don't care how professional they are, they go home, they cook steak on the grill or the Barbie or whatever they call it in Australia. They 100% humanize themselves outside of the office. And so give them a glimpse of who they are in those moments. And if you can do that, it speaks to them so much differently. So, sure, like I do believe in a level of sophistication, right? So, like, we have a touch piece in FTP called the unwritten story. We basically send a CEO or a CFO a book about the things they all accomplish from using our product, right? And it's always really exaggerated and hilarious, like how one firm, took their reps and increased, their quotas because they were selling 800% above the standard, through the sales rebellion, right? So just something fun and witty, but it's written by the prospect, right? So it's written by Chelsea Castle. So you get a book in the mail written by yourself that talks about essentially a value proposition through a familiar way. Then you open this thing up and all the pages are blank. And as a CEO or a CFO or a C-level executive, something that's familiar to you most likely is reading books, right? So it speaks to the level of who you are at this organization. And the blank pages are stuck with a sticky note at the beginning that says these pages are blank because you and I have yet to write this story. And the
That's so good.
eloquence, right?
So
The
good.
just the general emotion that people feel from that is definitely different. And so when we put people with custom campaigns instead of the rebellion, we do think about all the aspects of it for sure. We're not just like go to on the crumpled letter in all cases, even though it works fantastically. We are about risking what we'll risk in this moment ultimately, because that's what will give us the best reward. So we have to, as sellers, though, step away from the idea of professionalism. Professionalism fires 700 people for basically no reason. Professionalism is the boss with a lawsuit against them because they've sexually molested 12, 13 people at the office. This is professionalism, ladies and gentlemen. So if we're going to hide behind that mask, then I say to hell with it all. Right. Personally, like I look at it as we have to stop using that as a cop out and we have to instead say people are people. Let's speak to them.
Amen. I love that. I mean, yeah, professionalism, what does that even mean anymore? So take risks. That means being yourself, leaning into being confident. And also, I think what's important to maybe tag there and being confident is also not being too assumptive, right? We talk a lot about tentative tone. So you can still be yourself, be confident, lean into that, what do you say, healthy arrogance, and still kind of be tentative, ask questions. And a lot of what you were just saying too made me think about just being relatable, right? You got 9 seconds is the average time someone reads your email, and you really only have 3 seconds to get their attention if they even open your email. So that's just so good. We've got 1 minute left. One quick question for, what would you say, Dale, to anyone that people can start doing today, especially maybe they don't have the opportunity to send something to someone. If they're just doing some email outreach, what's one thing that sellers can start doing with email today?
I would tell people to rebel, stop being dictated in regards to your outcomes, right? By somebody else that doesn't care about you and doesn't care about your outcomes. They don't care about your wealth. They don't care about your family. They don't care about your legacy. Rebel. If you tell me I can only send email, I'm going to push back and say, you can send email with something else. I guarantee you. And I'm also going to say, okay, great. You can only send email. Why are we making an excuse that somehow email is the only thing I can send? Let's use email to be that thing that people desire and are looking for in their inbox in the first place. So ultimately, I would tell everybody listening today to rebel.
Beautiful. Well, there you have it, folks. Rebel. So good. We're already at time. That really flew. Thank you so much, Dale. Thanks everyone for being here today. You can catch us on YouTube, like I said, Lavender later. Subscribe to our newsletter so you can find on our website so you can stay up to date on the latest happenings with Lavender. Otherwise, we'll see you all next week. Thank you all